Okay, there we go.
Good. All right, hi, I'm John Wood. I'm working with Kimberly here as my patient and student. And what we're going to focus on today is the relationship between the muscles around a joint and why that is so important to work on both sides of the joint, not just on the side that is painful. To give you kind of an idea, if you think about how muscles work together in a most simple way, you have with your arm, you have a bicep that pulls your forearm towards you, and you have a tricep that extends it away from you. Now, how does that happen? Well, it happens because those two muscles work together. It's not just the contraction of the bicep that allows this to come together. It's the fact that it sends a signal to the tricep to stretch while I'm contracting so that it can do it without any resistance from the tricep. Now, whenever you have an injury in an area, you have those muscles actually locked down and no longer can, well, they may listen to the other muscle, but they can't execute what that muscle wants it to do. So say you've got an injury in your bicep here, and that locks down this tissue here. So when you extend, you're stretching this tissue that doesn't want to stretch, and you're not going to be able to do it. You're going to feel pain. But here's what's fascinating about that. Where you feel the pain is not in the area that's locked down. It's in the area of the muscle that is trying to extend that, because it is like a force meeting an immovable object. When these muscles are locked down, they don't let go, and they're really not painful because muscles were meant to lock. They were meant to, to contract and to work like that. So when you have a muscle that's all contracted in, oftentimes you won't feel much pain there unless you press on it. As you press on it, you're forcing that locked muscle to stretch a little bit. Doesn't want to do it, so it's going to relate a painful response to you, which indicates that it doesn't want to move out of its position. But for those two muscles to work together, you need to release that locked down to allow that tricep to extend it again. But as I was saying, where you're going to feel the problem is not where it's locked down, but in the muscle that's trying to do the work. It can actually injure itself trying to extend your arm when this muscle doesn't stretch to allow it to happen. And that's where most of this work is actually based on. It's not based on where the pain is at, but the symbiosis between the two muscles or the number of muscles that move that joint. You don't just have a hinge joint like this. You've got a shoulder, which is the most complex, most movable joint in the body, where it's also most vulnerable, where more muscles have to send signals to all the other muscles to either stretch or contract to allow you to do this movement without pain. And so what we're going to be doing is working a little bit with Kim on these aspects of especially the shoulders and up into the neck. And I will be explaining this a little bit more as we go. But that's one of the things that I think is sometimes missing in a lot of the therapies that we have nowadays is it focuses in on the painful area. When you go to get a massage from somebody and you tell them, well, my shoulders really hurt. So guess what they're going to do? They're going to work on that area. Now, why does that shoulder hurt? More often than not, that muscle that is hurting is overstretched because the other muscle in that joint is so contracted that it's in a constant state of stretch, and it will become fearful and lock down and create these painful little adhesions in this area, and that's where you feel the pain. But guess where the problem is coming from? It's this muscle in front that's so locked down that it doesn't let this muscle in back do its contraction that's necessary, and as it stays that way, it begins to injure this area here, and that's where most people work, on the injured area. Now think about this. If you release tension in that area by doing pressure in this area and giving a nice massage for the moment, that tissue will relax and it won't be so painful. But if you don't fix the problem by dealing with the contraction in the front part of her body, then it's going to come back, because we just basically put a Band-Aid on it for the moment. So to really get things fixed or moving the way they're supposed to normalize their movement patterns, you not only have to work on the area of pain, but find the area that is causing that pain. And what's interesting is she will probably never feel a lot of pain in this area of the muscle that's contracted, because, as I said, muscles love to contract. And as they do that, they're in happiness, and so there's no pain involved. But the muscle that they're putting upon with that stretching so much is constantly trying to do its contraction, but can't do it because this muscle is contracted so much in front. And why is this muscle contracted so much in front? It's because we work so much with these muscles as we're typing on a computer, as we're driving, as we're lifting and pulling. These muscles get so much work that they begin to contract and to become less efficient in any other movement, but they're very efficient in the movement that you're requiring them to do. This is where repetitive stress injuries come from. So what we're going to do is, she's complained of some things going on in the upper part of the back of her neck and shoulders, and so we're going to deal with that. We're going to release that, because those adhesions that have formed in those overstretched muscles need to be released so that that muscle can actually perform what it's supposed to do. The adhesions prevent it from stretching, and that prevents it from contracting. So we need to get rid of these adhesions. What is an adhesion? It's an area of tissue in that greater muscle system that they've worked so hard, or they've been stressed so much, that they actually lock down and fuse somewhat together to work and do that one movement. But it doesn't allow them to do other movements more freely, because now those fibers that were moving so independently and allowing you to do all these different movements, now they're locked together, and if you do that movement, they're not going to help you. They're actually going to tell you, don't do it, because guess what? We're not capable of doing it. We're all locked in together here. And so what we do is we use this approach, is I put pressure on this area that's locked down, and I have her contract that muscle to start breaking it up, to create heat in that area, to melt that tissue enough so it starts to separate a little bit. And we do it in an oscillating fashion to allow that tissue to, when it contracts, it's going to be even sharper because it doesn't want to contract. And then we relax it, because the one thing that muscle, that area of the muscle, that adhesion has been doing, is it's never been able to relax, because it's locked in into a contracted state with the other fibers around it. So when we do this work, it's not just as important to contract that muscle and hold it for the 2 seconds that are necessary, but to relax it for at least 2 to 3 seconds, so that it begins to understand what it was capable of doing before the injury or before the dysfunction that created that adhesion. Okay? Now we can talk more about this, and I will talk about this as I do all of this work, because this is what's fascinating about this type of therapy, is it's so specific to taking care of the things that prevent fluid movement of the muscle system. Not just you're trying to exercise and get that muscle stronger, or to stretch and get that whole muscle to stretch. The problem is more often than not, when you contract that muscle, you're contracting it with a lot of adhesions. So it can only contract as much as those fibers that contract can contract. And when you stretch, if you have adhesions in that muscle and you try to stretch that muscle, the only fibers that are actually going to stretch are the ones that can or are capable of, but the adhesions will not. And so the only way to release those is to do this kind of work, or something similar to it. To be honest with you, I haven't found anything as effective in the 15 years that I've been doing this therapy. This is by far the most effective way to release those adhesions and provide more normalized movement in those muscles, so that they can now As we get back to the bicep and the tricep, now when the bicep contracts and sends a signal to the tricep, it's capable of doing what the bicep asks it to do, and vice versa, because it's moving in unison and they're not locked down, and preventing that range of motion limitation that happens when you lock those fibers together. Okay? So let's go ahead and begin with a little bit of work here. Now I'm going to be working on this side a little bit with her, but what I want to do is, I'm going to take this down here since we won't need that right away. I'm going to be working on this side so that you can see this a little bit more easily. She has stuff going on over here, and it's, because of where we're at, that's not exactly, this area is not necessarily where it's painful for her, but if you think about the agonist-antagonist relationship in your body, it is everywhere. You have an antagonist. When you have muscles moving on this right side, there are antagonists on the other side that actually have to either stretch or allow this muscle to do what it's supposed to do. You also have that from superior to inferior, from top to bottom. When you have certain muscles that need to contract up above, the ones below have to stretch. And from front to back. So that's what we're addressing right now, is the inequity between the muscles in the back and in the front, and why she has pain up in this area here. So I'm going to work on this side to just kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about here. So this is the area that's probably overstretched, and this is an area that has developed adhesions that is so stretched that it's painful for her. Now, we will be working down here, but I want to just work on this area because you have to work on both areas anyway. Generally, I will work on this area to begin with, but I'm just going to give you what we're working on here and let you decide what you'd like to do best and first. Although I do recommend working on this area first. We're going to go to the area of pain, and we're going to find this adhesion that's helping create this pain. And as I press in that, what I do is I follow the softness of the tissue and deeper, and I communicate with Kim also as I'm doing this, is to, are you feeling any kind of increase in sharpness or sensitivity that's bright and like a knife kind of motion or feeling when you're doing it, whether you've ever been stabbed by a knife or not, that's not the point. But what you want to do is to move into that area where there is some tension in that tissue and find out whether it's toned muscle or whether it's actually an adhesion. So as I move into this area here, I'm finding some spots right down and through here. Are you feeling any sharpness in that area there?
Yeah.
A little bit? Okay. So what I do is I want to make sure that when I'm doing this work, because it is uncomfortable work, is that she is as comfortable as she can be, considering what we're going to be doing to release this muscle. And the palpable improvement afterwards is what we're looking for, because it's amazing how much freer she will feel once this adhesion has broken down and started to move more freely. So what I do is I find this area, and then I access my knowledge of the human body as to origins and insertions and such with the muscles, and I tell her how to contract that muscle to make that area of the muscle that's sharp actually even sharper. Why? Because the movement of that muscle is most restricted in the certain movement. When it is more painful to move it that way because it's more restricted. So what I have her do is I find it and find the sharpest spot. Does it feel like I'm there, or do you want me to go? Getting there, okay. And then we get to a point where it's pretty sharp, but it's not so much that she's, trying to jump off the table. You just need to develop an area that's uncomfortable for her, because when she contracts that muscle, it's going to increase in sharpness. Now, when you contract that muscle, if it doesn't increase in sharpness, you're not contracting the correct muscle. You have layers and layers of muscles here that do different movements in that same area. So what I do is I find out by having her move a couple of different ways to find out which of those muscles this adhesion is in. And when we find that muscle and we contract it, that's when it's going to hurt a little bit more. Now, it's when I say hurt, it's more a sensation, a nerve sensation of that stinginess that happens when the muscle is not able to fire the way it's supposed to. So as I'm down in here, as I've continued to put pressure on it, it's probably kind of faded a little bit, right? Yeah, okay, so let's find out by going a little bit deeper. And the reason it faded is just pressure sometimes is very good at releasing the tension in that adhesion. But why I have her move the muscle and contract it is to re-educate that muscle that was locked down on what it was meant to do when it was healthy. Because once it's locked down, it doesn't have much of a memory of what it was capable of doing. So now we're retraining it by making it contract and relax, contract and relax. And when we're done with this, I'm going to be putting on this special little formula cream that's really good at keeping the tissue nice and supple. And then I'm going to have her stretch that. Stretching it after the adhesion is broken down allows that whole muscle to stretch even more. Okay, so as I press into here, this is a muscle that probably, and just to give you an idea that you don't have to be an expert in muscle movement to be able to do this. What you can do is find this spot in here and then bring wherever the extremities are in this area, bring them closer together and you will be contracting that area there. So what I'm going to have her do here is I'm going to have you shrug your shoulder up. There we go, right up into that. There, do you feel that? Okay, and then relax. I have her hold it for 2 seconds and now I'm going to do that again. Now bring your neck towards it a little bit. Does that increase that a little bit? A little bit, right. And that, so now we're bringing and then relax. Now we're bringing this muscle closer together. This is probably the trapezius muscle. It attaches here, then attaches here. So when I bring the shoulder up and I bring the head towards it, guess what? The muscle comes closer together. So we're in essence giving it a contraction, even though you didn't know how it contracted. So, and we'll do this on a lot of other spots too. So as I continue to put pressure on that, I want you to go ahead, make sure I'm right on that again. There we go. Let's go ahead and bring the shoulder up, bring your head towards it and turn it a little bit, maybe around until you feel a little bit more sharpness right in, yeah, maybe a little bit there, right in, go, turn this way towards me, and now bring your neck back down into it. There we go. Now the shoulder up. Should that increase it a little bit? Okay. And so that's the contraction that I'm going to have her continue to do, and she's going to contract it. So go ahead and bring it up and bring the head towards it a little bit. There we go. 2 seconds, then relax. Relax that back down and do it again. Now each time that she contracts it, she's going to contract it exactly the same each time. As she does that, she's going to feel the same increase in sharpness until at some point when she brings that shoulder in and the head towards it, it's not as sharp. Why? Because that adhesion now is starting to move more freely and it's not complaining as much. Okay? Bring it up, bring that head into it. There we go. And then relax. It feels to me like that muscle is moving better. So, and you're feeling less sharpness when you do that movement, correct? Yep. Okay. Now, you can either stop here or ultimately what we need to do is go deep enough, and you're not going to injure anything if you go fairly deep into most of these tissues. The only 2 things that you need to be concerned about when you're doing this work is if you press and the patient says, oh, I feel kind of a stinger, a zing. It's almost as if you're pressing on a muscle that's pressing on a nerve. So be careful about that. You don't want to necessarily completely go away from it, but you want to move around until that sensation no longer is happening, that zinginess. Or if you're pressing deep enough, you could actually press against an artery, and what you'll be feeling, if you're feeling with your thumbs or your hands, you're going to feel a thump, thump, thump of the heartbeat. You want to stay away from that also. But anything else, even if you feel kind of a sharpness or a pain in that area, it's probably an adhesion and not a nerve, and definitely not an artery. So as we do this work, then we're finished with releasing this area here. And so what I do is get prepared here a little bit better. And I've got this cream. It's called Oregon cream, and I don't think I've got a jar of it in here, but I've had it before. In fact, my last patient, I gave the last jar that was in here. I'm wondering if Kim's husband David is here. If you wouldn't mind doing this favor for me, is to go into the office and bring out a jar of that cream.
Okay.
From the shelves in there.
Okay.
That would be awesome. Now, the reason I use this cream is it's incredible when it comes to relieving pain, but it's also even better at being able to help the body focus in on healing that area. It has some very special ingredients in it, and those are all on the label, and they're all organic, natural herbs, and incredibly effective in being able to take away whatever residual pain there is.
Sure.
Yeah, if you would just do that. This is a proprietary formula that I actually make. It was developed by some, let's just say, some old hippie biochemists, and with all the herbs and stuff involved with it, that they developed this formula and used a major driver in it called MSM, which is a derivative of DMSO, and it is incredible in its ability to bring whatever is in that salve deep into the tissues and start helping heal it from the inside out. It's not like icy hot, which stimulates or cools the surface of the tissues. This actually delves deep into the tissues and starts allowing the body to heal it from the inside out, not just mask it through sensitivity, deprivement, making it so cold that you don't feel anything, or making it so stingy that all you're feeling is sting rather than any pain. All right, so then when we're done with this, we stretch that area. Whatever movement that you did to actually bring those together, you want to take the muscle away from itself to stretch it. So what she's going to do is she's going to come this way, and where you feel it, you want to turn your head a little bit until you feel the most stretch in that area. Go ahead and just turn your chin until you find that. And when you found it, let me know. I would come this way a little bit more, because remember, you're bringing it this way, so bring it this way, and you feel that right in there? Very good. Wherever you feel that tension in the stretch the most, that's probably where the adhesion is releasing. Or there may be another adhesion in there. Whenever I do my stretches, I don't just do it to maintain that mobility. That stretch identifies where there is some limitations in that muscle's ability to stretch. And I use that intuitive nature that we have, that oftentimes we don't develop, but we can over time, is by just thinking about where it's tight. Go there with a finger, and more often than not, guess what you're going to find? You're going to find an adhesion, which needs to be released. And I've got something right in here that I found. You feel that right in there? And so this is on, probably her scalenes are right next to her trapezius, and it's a nice little knot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press on it. I want you just to relax right now, Kim. And let me press on it, and I want you to, one of the reasons I have to direct Kim is because she's a natural when it comes to being able to find the movements that release it. And even though I'm a little bit rote in certain specific movements, actually what you want to do is to be able to move completely and freely around that area. So that's what she's naturally doing. So sometimes I have to rein her in a little bit when it comes to this and have her do a specific movement that you can quantify when you're doing this or working with your patients. So as I press on that, tell me when it feels like I've found the sharpest spot. Right up in here, right here. Okay, so let's find out what this movement is. Into that, the same. Lift your chin a little bit. It feels to me like right in there. Right there. And now come back. And I want you just to go to that place again. Don't look for it. You find it. There. Holds it for a couple seconds and then comes back into it. I already feel this starting to melt a little bit. As it melts, she's going to notice that that contracted a little bit more intently. She's focusing in on the pressure point that I'm at. Some people call them trigger points, but this is the area that we want to contract intently as we do this. And how's that feeling? Starting an anatomy major to understand how to do this. There it is right there. I'm starting, which is not a bad thing because now the fibers are moving better, but you still want to find the spot and be able. There we go. It's still there, but it's starting to melt. This has been here a while, Kim. Yeah. More often than not, when it takes a while for these to release, they've been locked down for a while. There we go. Have you gotten some good release on that? A little bit of less pain, definitely, when you're doing that.
Yeah.
This is not where, you know, if we do this, it magically just explodes and dissipates. If it's been built up for a while, it's going to take a while to get rid of it. But here's the key to this, is once we begin to get the release in this muscle fiber in here, we can't just let it go. We can't just ignore it from here on out, because what it was familiar with was being like this. And if you explode it and relax it a little bit, if you don't pay any attention to it, like continue to do this work maybe tomorrow and the next day, it's going to lock back down to where it was familiar with. So this is why this work, as effective as it is only truly effective when you teach your patients how to do this work at home. You're not going to be able to follow them home unless you actually live with them and be able to stay there and do the work for them. So what I like to do is to teach my patients how to be proactive about this, to learn this simple process and to be able to do this at home, to continue to mobilize the tissue that we have begun to mobilize for the first time in a long time. Now, what she's also going to notice is probably that area is going to be a little sore for a while. And I liken that to a workout soreness. This muscle hasn't moved for quite a while. And if you notice when you go to work out and you work out pretty hard for the first time in a while, the next couple of days you're just really sore. That's because those muscles have moved for the first time in a long time. And that's what's happening with her. This is starting to get released. There we go. Yep, that's smaller. I can feel less of that. Can you feel that in there?
Yeah, I can't even feel it now.
Yeah, but there's still some there, but it's so much better that she's actually not feeling an awful lot there. But she will notice as she presses in there, feel where that adhesion is?
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So that's an area that you're going to continue to want to work on. So as you press on that, again, bring your shoulder. Now, you want to use if you're going to do this work, go ahead and take this away. Bring this hand into play for it, because you're going to be wanting to move this. And if you're using this hand up into it, it's more difficult. So she uses a separate one, her opposing hand. She moves her shoulder up into it as well. As she gets into it, she increases that sharpness, holds it for a couple of seconds, and then relaxes it. and then goes back to doing that until it starts to decrease in sharpness. Now there's two things you can do from that. You can either stop there, put some cream on it, stretch it, or if the patient is capable and willing to go deeper into that range of motion. Okay, that adhesion has been limiting that range of motion, and once it's loosened, her range of motion can improve. So sometimes you want to just go deeper into the deeper fibers that are still restricted. Okay? Okay, and what she's doing right now is ischemic pressure right in that area, just holding it, letting it sharpen up, and then it will soften up. Or she can do what she's probably going to do here, is to move into it and to create that extra sharpness, knowing that you're moving the right way. It's one of those fascinating things about this therapy, is that you know you're moving the correct way if it stings more. So I have a number of my patients who have become closet masochists because they absolutely love this work. It's one of those things where the sharpness or the pain that you create gets rid of the pain that you haven't created or that is uncontrolled. And that's why this is so incredibly effective. And it's as basic as it gets. There's no drugs involved. There's no trying to just generally exercise it or generally stretch it. We're getting to the places that aren't working the way they're supposed to. And if you just heard that little sigh, that is a palpable release of tension in that area of the adhesion. And now she's feeling so much less tension in that area. Now this wasn't even the area that she was complaining about. So getting back to where I was talking about, this is kind of the antagonist on the right side to the left side. And so whenever you're doing this work, check different places. She also has an antagonist muscle movement in front here, and she also has it even probably below it, but at this point I'm not going to be overly complicated about it. I want to be as simple as possible because this work is very simple work. But just follow certain guidelines, and it's amazing how effective it is at releasing those adhesions and allowing more range of motion in that muscle. And once that's happened, then is when I say that physical therapy is its most effective. Up until that time, physical therapy, for the most part, does not address those adhesions. And in my experience, you cannot contract or exercise those adhesions away. You can't stretch them away. They're going to maintain that immovability through all the exercise and stretching that you do. But if you release that and allow that muscle now to move more freely with the other fibers around it, then physical therapy, with its incredible science and being able to learn how to strengthen that muscle through its full range of motion, now it has its full range of motion because those adhesions are gone. And it can stretch. You'll notice that your stretch is more movable. You actually can stretch further into your range of motion because that adhesion no longer is limiting that range of motion of the entire muscle. Okay, let's go now to the area that is painful, and it's right over here. Again, just finding this work right in here. I can feel that right in through there, right there. Okay, so as I try to pin this, now here's another thing too, is what I generally use is I have a couple different tools that I use for this kind of work, because if you've been doing this for any period of time like I have, you will not be able to do it with your hands because there's so much pressure involved in this area here. Good. Get come here. Yeah, just bring it this way. Good. All right. So this work, I've learned how to use tools to put pressure on these areas. Now, you say, well, when you put pressure on it with a tool, don't you lose feeling in it? Well, initially probably, but this is where practice makes perfect. And so what I generally will do is I will feel that area first with my finger so that I kind of find where the adhesion is at. And then I take the tool and I slide it around until I feel some resistance. As I feel some resistance, I get closer and closer to that adhesion because it doesn't want to move out of the way. Does that feel like I'm right in there on that area?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you just have to learn this over time for the most part. But now you're saving all that tension on the joints of your fingers and your hands and your wrists. And so you can use these tools, and I totally recommend this tool right here. I'm not invested in the company at all. It's called a Theracane. It has one hooked end, and the other you can press on different areas of the body with the balls of this. And this hook allows you to get into the back where otherwise you can't. Okay? So, but right now I'm going to be using my fingers, and we're going to find this area again, and she's going to find the movement that increases that sharpness to the most, absolutely to the max, and that's the correct movement. Okay? Yep. Bring it up. Try to bring your shoulder down towards it. Yeah, kind of bring it back down towards the table. There we go, right in through there. You feel that little difference there? Yeah. Okay? And then relax. So now that she's found that, she's going to raise her shoulder that same way again. Bring it down into the table. Go ahead and press into me with your head. See if that includes the, yep, right in through there. And then she's going to keep doing that with the same effort until it begins to release. And she'll know it releases because the sharpness will be less. And this is how simple this can be. There we go. Feel that muscle start to move, which is another thing. As a therapist, you're tuning in also. You can't tell the pain. She's the one that feels the pain, but you can tell when the muscle, when it wasn't moving, when it starts to move, it feels like it's pressing against you. It wants to push you away because now it's capable of doing it. It's moving independently. And now she's stretching it away from it. Bringing her shoulder down.
There was a pop.
And there was a little bit of a pop. Yeah, there's a lot of adhesed tissue in this area here, and that's why we can work on this for quite a little while.
Yeah.
But right now we're going to just do this work to show you how effective it can be. And I'm also going to be working on some of the antagonist muscles to this area here. Let's do this one more time though, because I know you enjoyed that. All right, so let's make sure I'm right there.
Yeah.
Guide me a little bit. Also let your patient guide you a little bit. Sometimes you feel like you have it, but maybe it's not the most intense spot. There we go, right into there, good. And then you just hold it and let them do that pulsing type of contraction and relax. Make sure that they relax completely though, okay? This is so important. You need that muscle to be able to relax in between this intense work so that it begins to understand how to completely relax. There we go. I just felt that muscle really pop. There we go.
Yeah, that range of motion was a lot better.
Yeah, I can tell. Good. And then bring that shoulder down. That's all part of that. Good. In fact, a little bit forward maybe. Yeah, there we go. Which, by the way, again, as I mentioned before, with the stretch, it's almost 180 degrees diametrically opposed movement. If you're doing this kind of contraction, you're bringing it up like this and towards you. The stretch will be back and away from you with the arm extended. And voila, you have a stretch in this area here. How are you doing?
Good.
Good. Okay, so now we're going to deal with some of the potential causes of that. She has a little bit of medially rotated shoulders, and what that indicates is that the muscles in front here are tightened down pretty regularly, so it's rolling her shoulders in a little bit. You have a number of muscles that do that. You have the pectorals here, serratus anterior is helpful in that, and then there's a muscle called the subscapularis, which is on the anterior side of your scapula, which is a major, it's one of your rotator cuff muscles, the only one that actually rotates anteriorly. All the others either stabilize or rotate posteriorly. And so what we're going to do is we're going to find out where there might be some adhesions that are creating this roll forward with her shoulder. So I'm going to begin by working in this area here, and she is comfortable. If she's not comfortable with this kind of work, she takes the opposing hand and she puts it right up here to protect the breast tissue from this work, okay? And so I'll find this spot right down in, there's something going on right in here.
Yeah.
That feels really, really tight. So, there we go. So to release this, we have to make that muscle do what it was meant to do. And so that means she has to roll her shoulder into this. There we go, right there. And what I oftentimes do with my patients is I use a kind of a guideline as to, well, how do you roll that to get the most effective movement in that muscle? Now she's doing that without using her arms, which you can do, but it's not quite as specific as it is if you were to push that arm that way, and you feel that a little bit more right in there. And the guide I was talking about is you start with a point on her shoulder, and wherever you have that adhesion that you're pressing on, I think I lost it there. Let's get it again. So without doing that for a second, you find this spot on the shoulder, and wherever that adhesion is at, there's an imaginary line that you push your arm through, and I always push with the heel of my hand because it activates all that tissue that relates to this area here. Every time I push, I don't push with the fingertips because that's on the other side of where the problem is, and I push with the, so go ahead and push. There we go. Now move it around until you know you're at the most intense spot. Is that it right there? Okay. And then she holds it for a couple of seconds and then relax it. Just drop it right there, relaxes her shoulder. And I'm going to pin that with 2 fingers right here because it's rolling around a bit. And I'm going to have you go ahead and do that. Yeah, push. There, find it, and then relax. Good. Ah, it's starting to move. And again.